everyone, and good evening. Welcome to the Linglobe channel. This time, we'll be bringing you content about preserving the world's languages for the future. Please enjoy it to the end.
Imagine for a second that you are, well, crossing 3 different international borders. You're navigating some of the absolute steepest, most treacherous mountain ranges on Earth.
Right. Not an easy trip.
No, not at all. You're going through different political zones, hearing different national languages. But through this entire journey, you never once show a passport. And you're universally understood by the people you meet. Why? Because your identity, your entire lineage, is literally woven into the shirt on your back.
It sounds like fiction, but it's very real.
Exactly. Lingua voicent. Today, we're exploring this just incredible paradigm of human survival, a global community that completely subverts how we think about what a nation actually is.
It really is a remarkable framework. I mean, usually societies that last for millennia are anchored to, like, a highly defensible lowland, a river valley, right? Or
somewhere easy to farm.
Right. But the Yao people, they achieved this historical permanence through constant strategic movement across, honestly, some of the most inhospitable terrain in Asia.
And to anchor our conversation, Lingua, Eric, we have this incredibly detailed set of materials mapping out their history, their language, their whole cosmology. So I just want to jump right into the visuals here. Let's look at slide 1. Voices of the Highlands.
A great place to start.
Yeah, we'll keep this one brief, but it sets our foundation. It's a look into the origins and culture of the Yao people. But mostly, it establishes the altitude. Like, this is not a story about the plain.
Precisely. That visual, the mountains, that's our baseline. It's the evolutionary pressure that shaped everything about them. To really get it, we need to look at the territorial spread.
Which takes us perfectly into slide 2. A nation across borders. And this is where my traditional understanding of a map completely breaks down.
How so?
When I hear nation, I think of a defined polygon. A hard border, customs checkpoints, a capital city.
Right, the classic Westphalian model of a nation-state. It relies on a flat, contiguous block of territory. You're either inside the line or outside of it.
But the reality here just ignores that completely. The materials show a global Yao population of roughly 800,000 to 1 million people. In China, they're an ethnic minority in southern provinces, Guangxi, Yunnan, places like that. But then the map just spills right over the political lines into Southeast Asia.
Yeah, northern Vietnam, where they're called the Dao, Laos, northern Thailand.
It's incredible. It's like a transnational Highland network.
That's exactly what it is. You have to remember, those political borders between China and Vietnam or Laos, they were drawn recently, and they were drawn across the valleys. But the Yao, they inhabit the altitudes. The mountains aren't a barrier to them. The mountains are the connective tissue.
So it's essentially an archipelago. But instead of islands in an ocean, it's mountain peaks separated by valleys.
That is a perfect analogy.
But wait, maintaining an identity across 1 million people is hard enough in a modern country. How do you do it over such a fragmented landscape without, like, a king or a central government enforcing it?
By letting the environment do the enforcing. The terrain of Laos or Guangxi demands super-specific survival skills. Terrace farming, certain social structures. When your whole existence requires a shared methodology for surviving the mountains, well, that methodology becomes your culture.
Ah, okay. That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't just magically appear across thousands of miles of rugged peaks. There's a deep causality here, which brings us to slide 3. The timeline of movement.
And this timeline is essential. We're talking about deep, deep history.
Yeah, the first era here is ancient roots. They originated south of the Yangtze River, and they're documented all the way back to the Han Dynasty.
Right.
So we're talking about an established presence roughly 2,000 years ago. They aren't a recent offshoot.
No, they are foundational. And that Han Dynasty documentation is key. Because when a massive lowland empire meets a decentralized highland community, you get friction. And that friction defines the next several centuries.
Which is the second phase, centuries of exchange. The materials say this was marked by conflict, but also cultural interaction and religious syncretism with the Han Chinese.
Exchange is a very polite word for a very volatile frontier. As the Han Chinese expanded south for more farmland, the Yao had to choose: assimilate, fight, or retreat higher up.
And it seems they did a bit of everything. They absorbed Han culture, but didn't let it replace their own.
That's syncretism at work. It's a brilliant survival tool. You adopt the dominant power's trade mechanisms or spiritual frameworks, which makes you legible to the empire, but you preserve your internal structures.
But even that wasn't enough eventually. The third phase is the southern migration. In the 19th and 20th centuries, this massive acceleration pushes them deeper into Southeast Asia. Why the sudden push?
Think about the Qing dynasty during that time. Massive internal crises, rebellions, famine. The state militarized the south. The valleys became zones of acute danger, so the Yao used their ultimate defense mechanism, mobility.
They used the altitude as a pressure valve, moving south into Vietnam and Laos into terrain too steep for armies to follow.
Exactly, but that creates a huge problem. If you scatter your families across thousands of miles of ridges, your culture naturally shatters. Languages drift, rituals fade.
Right, so how did they stop that from happening? Let's move to slide 4, the Hmong-Mien root system, because this is the invisible infrastructure holding it all together.
Yes, the language is the neurological network of this community.
So the materials clarify that Yao is an umbrella term given by outsiders, but the unifying language internally is IuMien.
Correct.
And what's wild is that IuMien developed entirely independently of Tai Kadai, like Thai or Lao, and totally independently of Chinese.
Genuine linguistic isolation is incredibly rare in a region with so much historical conflict and trade, but the core architecture of IuMien remained completely distinct.
Though it did absorb loanwords over the centuries, right?
Oh, sure. When you border another ecosystem, things transfer. They borrowed words for new technologies or administrative terms. But borrowing a word for gunpowder doesn't change your fundamental grammar. The roots are still Hmong-Mien.
Speaking of that grammar, the actual mechanics of this language are wild. Let's look at slide 5, the architecture of IuMien, because the rules here are totally alien to English speakers.
Completely alien. It forces you to rethink how meaning is even generated.
So the materials list 3 pillars. First, tonal complexity, 6 to 8 distinct tones that dictate the absolute meaning of every syllable.
Right, and we need to clarify that tone here isn't emotion. In English, I can say water with a rising pitch as a question, but it still means water.
But in IuMien, the pitch is the definition. The sound ma means completely different things if it's a high pitch versus a low falling pitch.
Exactly. Misjudge the pitch and you entirely change the vocabulary. You could try to ask for tea and end up insulting someone.
Wow. That leads to the second pillar, monosyllabic rhythm. Everything is packed into these short, precise bursts. And the third pillar is context over inflection. 0 grammatical gender, 0 plural markers, no conjugations.
A radical departure from European languages.
Right. Like in English, words are like wet clay. We mold run into ran for the past tense. IuMien doesn't use wet clay. It uses solid, unalterable bricks.
That's the perfect way to put it. The syllable is fixed, the tone is fixed.
So meaning relies purely on syntax. The sentence holds up because you place the bricks in the exact right order. But wait, if it's all based on unalterable sounds and 8 distinct pitches, how do you write that down? Especially since they didn't have their own alphabet.
That is the massive historical problem they faced.
Which brings us to slide 6, capturing the voice, 2 eras of script. This is honestly one of the smartest workarounds I've ever seen.
It really is. To record their rituals, they looked at the Han Chinese writing system and basically hijacked it.
The traditional era here is called pseudo-scripture. They used Chinese characters, but they completely re-engineered them.
Through semantic borrowing and phonetic transcription.
Yeah, let's break that down. Semantic borrowing means taking a Chinese character just for its visual meaning.
Right. They see the Chinese character for mountain, they know what it means visually, but they don't say the Chinese word shan. They read the character and say their native IuMien word.
So they're using it like a universal emoji.
Exactly.
And then the flip side is phonetic transcription. Taking a Chinese character strictly for how it sounds, ignoring its meaning, just to spell out an IuMien concept.
Yes, it creates a script that looks like Chinese but would be total nonsense to a native Chinese reader.
It's basically a hyper-localized encryption. But the slide also details the modern era, the recent standardization of the IuMien unified Romanized alphabet.
Which was a massive leap. As the diaspora spread globally, they needed a script that could be typed on a standard keyboard, so they adopted the Latin alphabet.
But the Latin alphabet has no way to record 8 lexical tones. There's no letter for pitch.
No, there isn't, so they had to invent a mechanism.
And we see exactly how they did it on slide 7, the numerics of tone. They didn't use a messy system of accent marks.
No, accent marks are notoriously difficult to type and standardize digitally.
So instead, they put numerical values or specific consonants firmly at the end of the syllable. The example here is the word for person, meaning two, M-I-E-N-H-2.
Right. The M-I-E-N tells your mouth the physical shape to make.
But then you hit that 2 at the end,
Yeah.
or sometimes an H, and it's a silent tonal director.
It doesn't make its own sound. It's a coordinate for your vocal cords.
It's literally like sheet music embedded in the spelling. You read the bass, and the 2 yells, "Lock this into pitch register number 2." If it was an H, it would be a totally different pitch and a different word.
It's incredibly elegant. It translates an ancient tonal architecture into something you can text or email perfectly.
It bridges the mountain past with the digital present. But I want to pivot back to the physical mountains. Let's look at slide 8. Life shaped by altitude, because their culture is totally tied to the dirt they live on.
Absolutely. The sociology of the Yao is their agriculture.
The materials say their economy thrives on shifting cultivation, intricate terrace farming, tea harvesting, and high-altitude fruit. Let's talk about terrace farming. It looks beautiful in photos, but
it's an unfathomable amount of human labor. It's terraforming.
right, taking a steep slope that wants to wash away in the monsoon and manually carving slat steps into the bedrock, building mud walls, engineering gravity-fed irrigation.
And you can't do that alone. A single family can't carve a mountain. It mandates communal cohesion. If the village fractures, the terrace fails. The agriculture enforces the social contract.
Wow. And then shifting cultivation, knowing when to burn biomass to fertilize, when to move on, plus growing high-altitude tea, they turned worthless terrain into an economic engine.
They mastered the microclimates.
And they wear that mastery, literally. Let's look at slide 9, wearing the cosmos.
The visual culture is so defining.
The slide calls their clothing a wearable canvas. It's predominantly black outfits with heavy silver ornaments. But the embroidery is what's crazy.
Because it's not decorative, it's a text.
Yeah, the spirals, birds, dragons, suns, they're mapping the universe. You're wrapping yourself in your cosmology.
Every stitch is cultural data, and the patterns act as a highly specific visual dialect.
That's such a powerful concept. You're on ridge in Guangxi, you see a stranger from miles away, and before they even speak, the spirals on their sleeve tell you exactly what lineage they're from.
It's an identification system for a borderless nation.
A walking passport. Which brings us to how they conceptualize this universe they wear. Let's look at slide 10, the convergence of beliefs.
This is the ultimate manifestation of their syncretism. It's a deeply layered spiritual ecosystem.
3 main pillars here. First, Taoism, using talismans, paper effigies, and Chinese ritual texts.
Right, Taoism gave them a structured bureaucracy to manage the unseen forces of the world.
But they welded it to the second pillar, ancestor worship. And the slide notes they see ancestors as active participants in the family's survival.
Yes, not just passive history. If your great-grandfather helped carve that terrace farm, his labor is still feeding you today. So his spirit must be kept informed and appeased.
So you have Taoist priests using Chinese texts to manage Yao lineages. Amazing. And then the third pillar roots it all in the dirt. Local folk beliefs. Animism.
The foundational layer. Respect for the specific mountain spirits governing the weather and the land.
Right, because if your survival depends on a mud wall holding up during a storm, you know the mountain is alive. So a single ritual covers Taoist texts, ancestral offerings, and local mountain spirits all at once.
It's a spiritual survival strategy engineered over thousands of years. But as we know, the isolation of the Highlands eventually ends.
Which brings us to the final test of this culture. Slide 11. Beyond the mountains. How does a Highland culture survive the modern, globalized world?
The late 20th century migrations were an unprecedented displacement. Driven by the upheavals of the Vietnam War era, the Yao diaspora expanded far beyond Asia.
Yeah, establishing communities in the U.S. and France, moving from mist-covered ridges to American suburbs in European cities.
The environmental pressure inverted completely. They went from extreme isolation to extreme globalization.
And the slide says they navigate this through a dual reality, preserving ancient linguistic tones and rituals while fully integrating into bustling urban environments.
Just think about the daily life of someone in this diaspora, working as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, totally fluent in modern technology.
But coming home and switching right back to IuMien, using those 8 precise tones, texting relatives in Thailand using that Romanized alphabet with the silent numbers at the end.
Exactly. Or doing a weekend ritual honoring active ancestors, wearing that cosmic embroidery.
It proves that this nation across borders wasn't just a physical geography thing, it's a psychological framework. They spent 2,000 years practicing how to be a cohesive community without a centralized state.
So when they crossed the oceans, the infrastructure was already built. They just extended the network to the digital sphere. They brought the Highlands with them.
That is the perfect takeaway. We've covered 11 slides today, tracing ancient roots south of the Yangtze, their strategic high-altitude network, the brilliant architecture of the IuMien language, and the way they terraformed mountains and wore the cosmos. And finally, how that deeply syncretic worldview thrives today in the streets of France and the U.S. It's a completely unique vision of what a resilient global community looks like. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us to review these incredible materials.
Thank you for watching until the end. We will continue to bring you many more languages from around the world. Please subscribe to our channel. See you next time on the Ling Globe channel.